Let's do one last thing. You never. Poca non lo posso I told you. What you got? What for you? Affection of God. Whatever from your brother. I'm not sorry.
With expensive games you won't find anywhere else, FanDuel Casino has your shot at the #1 field, which is still winning. Better than number 85. Getting away from it all, especially your coworker Rob.
The teacher's search for meaning. These are the words of the teacher, King David's son, who ruled in Jerusalem.
Everything is meaningless,
Says the teacher.
completely meaningless. What do people get for all their hard work under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth never changes. The sun rises and the sun sets, then hurries around to rise again. The wind blows south and then turns north. Around and around it goes, blowing in circles. Rivers run into the sea, but the sea is never full. Then the water returns again to the rivers and flows out again to the sea. And everything is wearisome beyond description. No matter how much we see, we are never satisfied. No matter how much we hear, we are not content. History merely repeats itself. It has all been done before. Nothing under the sun is truly new. Sometimes people say, here is something new. But actually, it is old. Nothing is ever truly new. We don't remember what happened in the past and in future generations. No one will remember what we are doing now. I, the teacher, was king of Israel, and I lived in Jerusalem. I devoted myself to search for understanding and to explore by wisdom everything being done under heaven. I soon discovered that God has dealt a tragic existence to the human race. I observed everything going on under the sun, and really, it is all meaningless, like chasing the wind. What is wrong cannot be made right. What is missing cannot be recovered. I said to myself, look, I am wiser than any of the kings who ruled in Jerusalem before me. I have greater wisdom and knowledge than any of them. So I set out to learn everything from wisdom to madness and folly. But I learned firsthand that pursuing all this is like chasing the wind. The greater my wisdom, the greater my grief. To increase knowledge only increases sorrow. I said to myself, come on, let's try pleasure. Let's look for the good things in life. But I found that this too was meaningless. So I said, laughter is silly. What good does it do to seek pleasure? After much thought, I decided to cheer myself with wine. And while still seeking wisdom, I clutched at foolishness. In this way, I tried to experience the only happiness most people find during their brief life in this world. I also tried to find meaning by building huge homes for myself and by planting beautiful vineyards. I made gardens and parks, filling them with all kinds of fruit trees. I built reservoirs to collect the water to irrigate my many flourishing groves. I bought slaves, both men and women, and others were born into my household. I also owned large herds and flocks, more than any of the kings who had lived in Jerusalem before me. I collected great sums of silver and gold, the treasure of many kings and provinces. I hired wonderful singers, both men and women, and had many beautiful concubines. I had everything a man could desire, so I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me, and my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for all my labor. But as I looked at everything I had worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless, like chasing the wind. There was nothing really worthwhile in it. So I decided to compare wisdom with foolishness and madness. concluded is better than I, the king. I thought, wisdom is better than foolishness, just as light is better than darkness. For the wise can see where they are going, but fools walk in the dark. Yet I saw that the wise and the foolish share the same fate. Both will die. So I said to myself, since I will end up the same as the fool, what's the value of all my wisdom? This is all so meaningless. For the wise and the foolish both die. The wise will not be remembered any longer than the fool. In the days to come, both will be forgotten. So I came to hate life because everything done here under the sun is so troubling. Everything is meaningless, like chasing the wind. I came to hate all my hard work here on earth, for I must leave to others everything I have earned. And who can tell whether my successors will be wise or foolish? Yet they will control everything I have gained by my skill and hard work under the sun. How meaningless. So I gave up in despair, questioning the value of all my hard work in this world. Some people work wisely with knowledge and skill, then must leave the fruit of their efforts to someone who hasn't worked for it. This too is meaningless, a great tragedy. So what do people get in this life for all their hard work and anxiety? Their days of labor are filled with pain and grief. Even at night, their minds cannot rest. It is all meaningless. So I decided there is nothing better than to enjoy food and drink, and to find satisfaction in work. Then I realized that these pleasures are from the hand of God. For who can eat or enjoy anything apart from Him? God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy to those who please Him. But if a sinner becomes wealthy, God takes the wealth away and gives it to those who please Him. This too is meaningless, like chasing the wind. For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What do people really get for all their hard work? I have seen the burden God has placed on us all. Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart. But even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. So I concluded there is nothing better than to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can. And people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are gifts from God. And I know that whatever God does is final. Nothing can be added to it or taken from it. God's purpose is that people should fear Him. What is happening now has happened before, and what will happen in the future has happened before, because God makes the same things happen over and over again. I also noticed that under the sun, there is evil in the courtroom. Yes, even the courts of law are corrupt. I said to myself, in due season, God will judge everyone, both good and bad, for all their deeds. I also thought about the human condition, how God proves to people that they are like animals. For people and animals share the same fate. Both breathe and both must die. So people have no real advantage over them. How meaningless. Both go to the same place. They came from dust and they return to dust. For who can prove that the human spirit goes up and the spirit of animals goes down into the earth? So I saw that there was nothing better for people than to be happy in their work. That is why we are here. No one will bring us back from death to enjoy life after we die. Again, I observe all the oppression that takes place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, with no one to comfort them. The oppressors have great power, and their victims are helpless. So I concluded that the dead are better off than the living. But most fortunate of all are those who are not yet born, for they have not seen all the evil that is done under the sun. Then I observed that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors. But this too is meaningless, like chasing the wind. Fools hold their idle hands, leading them to ruin. And yet, better to have one handful with quietness than two handfuls with hard work and chasing the wind. I observed yet another example of something meaningless under the sun. This is the case of a man who is all alone, without a child or a brother, yet who works hard to gain as much wealth as he can. But then he asks himself, who am I working for? Why am I giving up so much pleasure now? It is all so meaningless and depressing. Two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, two people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. Three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. It is better to be a poor but wise youth than an old and foolish king who refuses all advice. Such a youth could rise from poverty and succeed. He might even become king, though he has been in prison. But then everyone rushes to the side of yet another youth who replaces him. Endless crowds stand around him. But then another generation grows up and rejects him too. So it is all meaningless, like chasing the wind. As you enter the house of God, keep your ears open and your mouth shut. It is evil to make mindless offerings to God. Don't make rash promises, and don't be hasty in bringing matters before God. After all, God is in heaven, and you are here on earth. So let your words be few. Too much activity gives you restless dreams. Too many words make you a fool. When you make a promise to God, don't delay in following through, for God takes no pleasure in fools. Keep all the promises you make to him. It is better to say nothing than to make a promise and not keep it. Don't let your mouth make you sin, and don't defend yourself by telling the temple messenger that the promise you made was a mistake. That would make God angry, and he might wipe out everything you have achieved. Talk is cheap, like daydreams and other useless activities. Fear God instead. Don't be surprised if you see a poor person being oppressed by the powerful, and if justice is being miscarried throughout the land. For every official is under orders from higher up, and matters of justice get lost in red tape and bureaucracy. Even the king milks the land for his own profit. Those who love money will never have enough. How meaningless to think that wealth brings true happiness. People who work hard sleep well, whether they eat little or much. But the rich seldom get a good night's sleep. There is another serious problem I have seen under the sun. Hoarding riches harms the saver. Money is put into risky investments that turn sour, and everything is lost. In the end, there is nothing left to pass on to one's children. We all come to the end of our lives as naked and empty-handed as on the day we were born. We can't take our riches with us, and this too is a very serious problem. People leave this world no better off than when they came. All their hard work is for nothing, like working for the wind. Throughout their lives, they live under a cloud, frustrated, discouraged, and angry. Even so, I have noticed one thing at least that is good. It is good for people to eat, drink, and enjoy their work under the sun during the short life God has given them, and to accept their lot in life. And it is a good thing to receive wealth from God, and it is to enjoy it. To enjoy your work and accept your lot in life. This is indeed a gift from God. God keeps such people so busy enjoying life that they take no time to brood over the past. There is another serious tragedy I have seen under the sun, and it weighs heavily on humanity. God gives some people great wealth and honor and everything they could ever want, but then he doesn't give them the chance to enjoy these things. They die, and someone else, even a stranger, ends up enjoying their wealth. This is meaningless, a sickening tragedy. A man might have 100 children and live to be very old, but if he finds no satisfaction in life and doesn't even get a decent burial, it would have been better for him to be born dead. His birth would have been meaningless, and he would have ended in darkness. He wouldn't even have had a name, and he would never have seen the sun or known of its existence. Yet he would have had more peace than in growing up to be an unhappy man. He might live 1,000 years twice over, but still not find contentment. And since he must die like everyone else, well, what's the use? All people spend their lives scratching for food, but they never seem to have enough. So are wise people really better off than fools? Do poor people gain anything by being wise and knowing how to act in front of others? Enjoy what you have rather than desiring what you don't have. Just dreaming about nice things is meaningless, like chasing the wind. Everything has already been decided. It was known long ago what each person would be. So there's no use arguing with God about your destiny. The more words you speak, the less they mean. So what good are they? In the few days of our meaningless lives, who knows how our days can best be spent? Our lives are like a shadow. Who can tell what will happen on this earth after we're gone? A good reputation is more valuable than costly perfume, and the day you die is better than the day you were born. Better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. After all, everyone dies, so the living should take this to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for sadness has a refining influence on us. A wise person thinks a lot about death, while a fool thinks only about having a good time. Better to be criticized by a wise person than to be praised by a fool. A fool's laughter is quickly gone, like thorns crackling in a fire. This also is meaningless. Extortion turns wise people into fools, and bribes corrupt the heart. Finishing is better than starting. Patience is better than pride. Control your temper, for anger labels you a fool. Don't long for the good old days. This is not wise. Wisdom is even better when you have money. Both are a benefit as you go through life. Wisdom and money can get you almost anything, but only wisdom can save your life. Accept the way God does things, for who can straighten what he has made crooked? Enjoy prosperity while you can, but when hard times strike, realize that both come from God. Remember that nothing is certain in this life. I have seen everything in this meaningless life, including the death of good young people and the long life of wicked people. So don't be too good or too wise. Why destroy yourself? On the other hand, don't be too wicked either. Don't be a fool. Why die before your time? Pay attention to these instructions, for anyone who fears God will avoid both extremes. One wise person is stronger than 10 leading citizens of a town. Not a single person on earth is always good and never sins. Don't eavesdrop on others. You may hear your servant curse you, for you know how often you yourself have cursed others. I have always tried my best to let wisdom guide my thoughts and actions. I said to myself, I am determined to be wise, but it didn't work. Wisdom is always distant and difficult to find. I searched everywhere, determined to find wisdom and to understand the reason for things. I was determined to prove to myself that wickedness is stupid and that foolishness is madness. I discovered that a seductive woman is a trap more bitter than death. Her passion is a snare, and her soft hands will bind you. Those who please God will escape her, but sinners will be caught in her snare. This is my conclusion. How wonderful to be wise, to analyze and interpret things. Wisdom lights up a person's face, softening its harshness. Obey the king since you vowed to God that you would. Don't try to avoid doing your duty, and don't stand with those who plot evil, for the king can do whatever he wants. His command is backed by great power. No one can resist or question it. Those who obey him will not be punished. Those who are wise will find a time and a way to do what is right, for there is a time and a way for everything, even when a person is in trouble. Indeed, how can people avoid what they don't know is going to happen? None of us can hold back our spirit from departing. None of us has the power to prevent the day of our death. There is no escaping that obligation, that dark battle. And in the face of death, wickedness will certainly not rescue the wicked. I have thought deeply about all that goes on here under the sun, where people have the power to hurt each other. I have seen wicked people buried with honor, yet they were the very ones who frequented the temple and are now praised in the same city where they committed their crimes. This too is meaningless. When a crime is not punished quickly, people feel it is safe to do wrong. But even though a person sins 100 times and still lives a long time, I know that those who fear God will be better off. The wicked will not prosper, for they do not fear God. Their days will never grow long, like the evening shadows. And this is not all that is meaningless in our world. In this life, good people are often treated as though they were wicked, and wicked people are often treated as though they were good. This is so meaningless. So I recommend having fun, because there is nothing better for people in this world than to eat, drink, and enjoy life. That way, they will experience some happiness along with all the hard work God gives them under the sun. In my search for wisdom and in my observation of people's burdens here on earth, I discovered that there is ceaseless activity, day and night. I realized that no one can discover everything God is doing under the sun. Not even the wisest people discover everything, no matter what they claim. This too I carefully explored. Even though the actions of godly and wise people are in God's hands, no one knows whether God will show them favor. The same destiny ultimately awaits everyone, whether righteous or wicked, good or bad, ceremonially clean or unclean, religious or irreligious. Good people receive the same treatment as sinners, and people who make promises to God are treated like people who don't. It seems so tragic that everyone under the sun suffers the same fate. That is why people are not more careful to be good. Instead, they choose their own mad course, for they have no hope. There is nothing ahead but death anyway. There is hope only for the living. As they say, it's better to be a live dog than a dead lion. The living at least know they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, nor are they remembered. Whatever they did in their lifetime, loving, hating, envying, is all long gone. They no longer play a part in anything here on earth. So go ahead, eat your food with joy, and drink your wine with a happy heart, for God approves of this. Wear fine clothes with a splash of cologne. Live happily with the woman you love through all the meaningless days of life that God has given you under the sun. The wife God gives you is your reward for all your earthly toil. Whatever you do, do well. For when you go to the grave, there will be no work or planning or knowledge or wisdom. I have observed something else under the sun. The fastest runner doesn't always win the race, and the strongest warrior doesn't always win the battle. The wise sometimes go hungry, and the skillful are not necessarily wealthy, and those who are educated don't always lead successful lives. It is all decided by chance, by being in the right place at the right time. People can never predict when hard times might come. Like fish in a net or birds in a trap, people are caught by sudden tragedy. Here is another bit of wisdom that has impressed me as I have watched the way our world works. There was a small town with only a few people, and a great king came with his army and besieged it. A poor, wise man knew how to save the town, and so it was rescued. But afterward, no one thought to thank him. So even though wisdom is better than strength, those who are wise will be despised if they are poor. What they say will not be appreciated for long. Better to hear the quiet words of a wise person than the shouts of a foolish king. Better to have wisdom than weapons of war, but one sinner can destroy much that is good. As dead flies cause even a bottle of perfume to stink, so a little foolishness spoils great wisdom and honor. A wise person chooses the right road. A fool takes the wrong one. You can identify fools just by the way they walk down the street. If your boss is angry at you, don't quit. A quiet spirit can overcome even great mistakes. There is another evil I have seen under the sun. Kings and rulers make a grave mistake when they give great authority to foolish people and low positions to people of proven worth. I have even seen servants riding horseback like princes, and princes walking like servants. When you dig a well, you might fall in. When you demolish an old wall, you could be bitten by a snake. When you work in a quarry, stones might fall and crush you. When you chop wood, there is danger with each stroke of your axe. Using a dull axe requires great strength, so sharpen the blade. That's the value of wisdom. It helps you succeed. If a snake bites before you charm it, what's the use of being a snake charmer? Wise words bring approval, but fools are destroyed by their own words. Fools base their thoughts on foolish assumptions, so their conclusions will be wicked madness. They chatter on and on. No one really knows what is going to happen. No one can predict the future. Fools are so exhausted by little work that they can't even find their way home. What sorrow for the land ruled by a servant, the land whose leaders feast in the morning. Happy is the land whose king is a noble leader, and whose leaders feast at the proper time to gain strength for the work, not to get drunk. Laziness leads to a sagging youth. Idleness leads to a leaky house. A party gives laughter, wine gives happiness, and money gives everything. Never make light of the king, even in your thoughts. And don't make fun of the powerful, even in your own bedroom. For a little bird might deliver your message and tell them what you said. Send your grain across the seas, and in time, profits will flow back to you. But divide your investments among many places, for you do not know what risks might lie ahead. When clouds are heavy, the rains come down. Whether a tree falls north or south, it stays where it falls. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. Just as you cannot understand the path of the wind or the mystery of a tiny baby growing in its mother's womb, so you cannot understand the activity of God, who does all things. Plant your seed in the morning and keep busy all afternoon, for you don't know if profit will come from one activity or another, or maybe both. Life is sweet. How pleasant to see a new day dawning. When people live to be very old, let them rejoice in every day of life. But let them also remember there will be many dark days. Everything still to come is meaningless. Young people, it's wonderful to be young. Enjoy every minute of it. Do everything you want to do. Take it all in. But remember that you must give an account to God for everything you do. So refuse to worry and keep your body healthy. But remember that you, with a whole life before you, is meaningless. Don't let the excitement of youth cause you to forget your Creator. Honor Him in your youth before you grow old and say, life is not pleasant anymore. Remember Him before the light of the sun, moon, and stars is dim to your old eyes, and rain clouds continually darken your sky. Remember Him before your legs, the guards of your house, start to tremble, and before your shoulders, the strong men stoop. Remember Him before your teeth, your few remaining servants, stop grinding, and before your eyes, the women looking through the windows see dimly. Remember Him before the door to life's opportunities is closed and the sound of work fades. Now you rise at the first chirping of the birds, but then all their sounds will grow faint. Remember Him before you become fearful of falling and worry about danger in the streets, before your hair turns white like an almond tree in bloom, and you drag along without energy like a dying grasshopper, and the caperberry no longer inspires sexual desire. Remember Him before you near the grave, your everlasting home, when the mourners will weep at your funeral. Yes, remember your Creator now while you are young, before the silver cord of life snaps and the golden bowl is broken. Don't wait until the water jar is smashed at the spring and the pulley is broken at the well, for then the dust will return to the earth and the spirit will return to God who made you. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher. Completely meaningless.
Keep this in mind. The teacher was considered wise, and he taught the people everything he knew. He listened carefully to many proverbs, studying and classifying them. The teacher sought to find just the right words to express truths clearly.
The words of the wise are like cattle prods, painful but helpful. Their collected sayings are like a nail-studded stick with which a shepherd drives the sheep. But my child, let me give you some further advice. Be careful, for writing books is endless, and much study wears you out. That's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad.
Liberal leader Mark Carney has quite the resume. But let's take a closer look. He was vice chair at Brookfield when they evicted tenants and raised rents to boost corporate landlord profits. And he was caught lying about Brookfield's environmental record to make more money for investors. For Carney, making the rich richer is just another day at the office. That's a big red flag. Mark Carney, in it for billionaires, not for working people.
Imagine standing in the middle of a city that once pulsed with life, faith, and purpose. A city whose very foundations were laid as a testament to divine presence and covenant. Now, however, all that remains are shattered walls, burned gates, and streets blanketed in the dust of abandonment. Gone are the echoes of worship that once rose from the temple, the voices of priests leading prayers, and the rhythmic bustle of merchants and pilgrims moving through the gates. In their place is an eerie silence, heavy with the weight of loss, despair, and disgrace. This is not the setting of a fictional tale, but the historical reality of Jerusalem after its destruction by the Babylonians in 586 BC, a city that once symbolized the presence of the Almighty, now reduced to a mere shadow of its former glory. But in the midst of this desolation, a figure emerges. Not a king, not a warrior, not even a prophet, but a man whose title seems almost insignificant in comparison to the task before him. He is not a statesman nor a military strategist, but a simple cupbearer to the Persian king. A position of privilege, yet far removed from the burdens of national restoration. And yet, deep within his heart, an unquenchable fire burns for a city he has never seen, a people whose suffering he cannot ignore, and a divine calling that will not let him remain passive. His name is Nehemiah, and though history may have seen him as an ordinary servant in a foreign palace, God had destined him to be the leader of one of the most extraordinary rebuilding projects of all time. Nehemiah's story is not just about reconstructing walls, but about reclaiming a lost identity, reviving a broken faith, and standing firm against opposition from both within and without. It is a tale of resilience in the face of overwhelming obstacles, of courage born from prayer, and of a vision so compelling that not even the mightiest of enemies could thwart it. More than that, it is a story that continues to echo through history, challenging us to ask ourselves what in our own lives lies in ruins, what dreams have been reduced to ashes, what faith has been shaken by doubt, and most importantly, will we, like Nehemiah, rise from the rubble and step into the purpose God has set before us? If you have ever faced brokenness, if you have ever longed for restoration, or if you have ever wondered whether it is possible to rebuild what has been lost, then this journey through the book of Nehemiah is for you. This is not merely a history lesson, it is a blueprint for anyone who has ever felt called to step into something greater than themselves, to lead in the face of fear, and to trust that with God, even the most insurmountable obstacles can be overcome. Because as Nehemiah himself boldly declared, the God of heaven will give us success. Nehemiah 2:20. But how did he do it? How did a mere cupbearer rally an entire nation to rebuild what had been destroyed for over a century? How did he face relentless opposition without faltering? And more importantly, what can his journey teach us about faith, perseverance, and leadership today? Join us as we uncover the shocking, inspiring, and deeply relevant truth about the book of Nehemiah. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support us and join us on this journey of exploring meaningful Bible stories. Now, let's dive into today's special story with Bible Story Explorations. The surprising truth about Nehemiah nobody tells you. To understand the weight of Nehemiah's burden, we must step back into a time of devastation, exile, and shattered hopes. A time when the people of Israel, once a mighty nation under King David and Solomon, had been reduced to a remnant scattered across foreign lands. Jerusalem, the city that had once been the heart of Jewish worship, the dwelling place of God's presence, and the pride of his chosen people, had been left in ruins, its once impenetrable walls lying in heaps of rubble, its gates burned to ash, and its temple desecrated by invaders who showed no mercy. In 586 BC, after years of prophetic warnings that went unheeded, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar had stormed through Judah, razing Jerusalem to the ground, slaughtering its inhabitants and leading thousands into exile. For 70 years, the people of Israel lived as captives in a land not their own, longing for the city they had lost, clinging to the hope that one day God would restore what had been taken from them. And yet, even when that hope began to materialize, as the Persian king Cyrus issued a decree allowing the exiles to return, Ezra 1:14, the reality was far from the glorious restoration they had envisioned. Though some had gone back under the leadership of Zerubbabel to rebuild the temple, and later Ezra to restore spiritual order, the walls of Jerusalem remained broken, leaving the city vulnerable to attacks and disgrace. A city without walls in the ancient world was a city without security, without dignity, and without a future, an easy prey for surrounding enemies who wished to see it forever desolate. Worse still, these shattered walls were not just a physical problem, they were a spiritual indictment, a sign that the people had not yet fully returned to God, that their identity as his chosen nation remained fragile, and that their sins had led them to a place of humiliation before the world. It is in this bleak and desolate context that Nehemiah enters the story, not as a warrior returning from exile, not as a prophet declaring divine judgment, and not even as a ruler with political authority, but as a simple cupbearer in the royal courts of Persia, serving Artaxerxes, the most powerful man on earth. The role of a cupbearer was one of immense trust. He was the one who ensured the king's drink was free from poison, standing by his side in moments of both feasting and political strategy. Yet, despite the luxury of the Persian palace and the comfort of his privileged position, Nehemiah's heart was not captivated by the splendor of the empire in which he served, nor was he lulled into complacency by the security of his life. His thoughts, his prayers, and his deepest concerns were not for his own welfare, but for a distant city he had never seen, for a people he had never ruled, and for a cause that seemed utterly impossible. Then came the moment that would change everything. One day his brother Hanani arrived from Judah, bringing news from Jerusalem, and with a few simple words he shattered Nehemiah's world. Those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. Nehemiah 1:3, NIV. The words were not just a report, they were a dagger to Nehemiah's soul. In an instant, he was overwhelmed by the weight of this reality. Not only was the city defenseless, but the very reputation of Israel's God was at stake. What did it say about Yahweh, the Almighty, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if his holy city lay in ruins while the surrounding nations flourished? What hope did Israel have of ever reclaiming its identity, of ever restoring its covenant with God, if its people were still living in disgrace? Nehemiah did not respond with indifference, nor did he attempt to dismiss the gravity of the situation. He did not brush off the news as something beyond his control, nor did he allow himself to be distracted by the comfort of palace life. Instead, he was utterly undone. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Nehemiah 1:4 NIV. This was no ordinary sadness, no fleeting moment of emotion that would soon be forgotten. This was the cry of a man whose heart had been gripped by divine purpose, whose soul ached with the burden of a mission yet unspoken, and whose faith compelled him to seek God's direction before taking a single step forward. It is here that we see the true nature of Nehemiah's leadership, not in the strength of his position, nor in the brilliance of his strategy, but in the depth of his dependence on God. Before lifting a single brick, before rallying a single worker, before even uttering a word to the king, he fell to his knees, understanding that no true restoration, whether of a city, a people, or a heart, can begin without first turning to the one who holds all things in his hands. He did not allow despair to paralyze him, but neither did he rush ahead with human wisdom alone. Instead, he surrendered completely, acknowledging that if Jerusalem was to rise from its ruins, it would not be by his power, nor by the decree of an earthly king, but by the hand of God himself. And so, with his heart burdened and his spirit resolved, Nehemiah prepared to step into a calling that would not only rebuild walls, but reignite faith, restore dignity, and reveal the unwavering faithfulness of God. Little did he know that the road ahead would be fraught with opposition, deception, and trials that would test the very core of his convictions. But one thing was certain. He would not turn away from this burden, and he would not rest until the city of his forefathers once again stood strong. But how would a mere cupbearer, a servant in a foreign court, achieve what generations before him had failed to do? What gave him the confidence to believe that he could stand before the most powerful ruler of his time and request the impossible? And how would he face the enemies who were determined to ensure that Jerusalem remained a city of ruins? To answer these questions, we must follow Nehemiah's journey as he steps into a destiny greater than himself, trusting that the God who placed this burden upon his heart would also provide the way forward. Burdened by the devastating news of Jerusalem's ruins and the suffering of his people, Nehemiah found himself caught in a conflict between the comfort of his privileged position and the overwhelming call upon his heart. He was not a man of royal blood, nor a military commander with influence over armies, nor even a priest with spiritual authority. Yet the weight of the mission pressed so heavily upon him that he could not shake it, nor could he pretend that his life would ever be the same. But what could he do? How could a mere servant change the fate of a city that had remained in desolation for nearly a century? And more importantly, how could he, a foreigner in the Persian court, even dare to ask the most powerful ruler in the world for permission to leave his post and rebuild the ruins of his homeland? As days turned into weeks, Nehemiah remained in a state of deep sorrow, his spirit wrestling between the impossibility of the task and the unwavering belief that the God who had placed this burden upon him would also make a way. He fasted, he prayed, and he pleaded before the God of heaven, not merely for strength, but for favor, knowing that unless the heart of the king was moved, his mission would be doomed before it even began. He recalled the ancient words spoken by King Solomon at the dedication of the temple, when he prayed that if God's people ever found themselves in exile, scattered because of their sins, but turned back to him with all their heart, he would hear their prayers and restore them. 1 Kings 8:46-50. Holding on to that promise, Nehemiah did not act impulsively, but sought divine guidance, preparing himself for the right moment, waiting for God to open a door that no man could shut. Then, on an otherwise ordinary day, that moment arrived. Nehemiah, as he had done countless times before, entered the royal court to serve King Artaxerxes, presenting him with wine and fulfilling his duties as cupbearer. Yet something was different. He had masked his sorrow for months, but on this day, the weight of his grief could no longer be concealed. His face, usually composed and unshaken in the presence of royalty, betrayed the anguish in his heart. And in an unexpected turn of events, the king, known for his unpredictable temper and absolute authority, took notice. "Why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart." Nehemiah 2:2 NIV. At that moment time seemed to freeze. The air in the vast, opulent throne room grew heavy with tension, and Nehemiah's heart pounded within his chest. To appear downcast in the presence of the king was a serious offense, for Persian monarchs surrounded themselves with luxury and demanded that their attendants reflect the joy and security of their rule. Sadness before the king was not just an inconvenience, it was an act of disrespect that could cost a man his life. Nehemiah knew this, and as fear crept in, he recorded in his own words, "I was very much afraid." Nehemiah 2:2 NEV. Yet fear was not his master. Instead of retreating into silence or fabricating an excuse, he took a deep breath and uttered the words that could either seal his fate or open the door to a divine opportunity. "May the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" Nehemiah 2:3 NIV. The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, uncertainty loomed. Would the king respond with anger, dismissing Nehemiah's sorrow as unworthy of his attention? Would he see this as an act of treason, a longing for another land above the kingdom Nehemiah served? But then, in a moment that could only be orchestrated by the unseen hand of God, Artaxerxes spoke, not with wrath nor with indifference, but with genuine curiosity. "What is it you want?" Nehemiah 2:4 NIV. The question was an open door, an invitation for Nehemiah to make his request known. Yet even in that moment of favor, Nehemiah did not rush forward with his own words. Instead, he paused, offering up a silent but desperate prayer to the God of heaven, seeking wisdom and courage for what he was about to say. He had spent months praying in secret, but now, in the presence of earthly power, he whispered one more petition before stepping into the unknown. And so, emboldened by divine assurance, Nehemiah made his request, not timidly, not hesitantly, but with clarity and conviction. "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it." Nehemiah 2:5 NIV. The words carried an audacity that defied all logic. A servant asking a king not only for leave, but for authority to rebuild a city known for its rebellious past was unheard of. Yet what happened next could only be described as a miracle. The king, instead of rejecting the request, leaned forward intrigued. He asked Nehemiah how long he would be gone, implying that his return was expected, a clear sign that favor was upon him. Sensing the divine orchestration unfolding before him, Nehemiah went even further, boldly requesting letters for safe passage, supplies for the reconstruction, and timber from the royal forests for the gates of the city, the temple, and even his own residence. It was a request that bordered on the impossible, yet Artaxerxes granted every single demand. "And because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my requests." Nehemiah 2:8 NIV. With official documents in hand and royal resources at his disposal, Nehemiah did not leave Persia as a mere servant. He departed as a man on a divine mission, carrying not only the blessing of an earthly king, but the calling of the King of Kings. Accompanied by royal officials and cavalry, he traveled across vast distances, through treacherous lands, moving ever closer to the ruins that had haunted his prayers. He had left the grandeur of the Persian palace, stepping into a future filled with uncertainty, opposition, and challenges beyond imagination. But though he did not yet know the trials that awaited him, The conspiracies, the enemies lurking in the shadows, the doubts that would rise from within his own people, he knew one thing for certain. The same God who had stirred his heart in the courts of Persia was the God who would guide him to the gates of Jerusalem. The journey had begun, and with each passing mile, the cupbearer of the king moved closer to his destiny, not as a servant of man, but as a leader chosen by God. And so, as Nehemiah approached the broken walls of Jerusalem, the question was no longer whether the city could be rebuilt, but whether the people had the faith, the courage, and the resilience to stand alongside him. What would he find upon his arrival? Would the people rise to the challenge, or had their hope faded beyond repair? And most importantly, would the enemies of Israel remain silent, or would they fight to ensure that Jerusalem remained nothing more than a memory? What happens next will shape not only the course of Nehemiah's mission, but the future of a nation that had long awaited redemption. Nehemiah had spent months carrying the burden of a city he had never seen, praying for a people who had long lost hope, and waiting for the moment when God's plan would unfold before his very eyes. Now, as he stood on the outskirts of Jerusalem, he finally faced the reality of the place that had weighed so heavily on his heart. But nothing could have fully prepared him for what he saw. The city that once stood as the dwelling place of God, the center of worship and the pride of Israel, lay in utter devastation. The walls, meant to protect its inhabitants, were now reduced to scattered ruins. The gates, once strong and fortified, had been burned to cinders, leaving the city vulnerable and exposed. It was not merely a broken city. It was a symbol of disgrace, a visual representation of the downfall of a nation that had once been chosen, set apart, and called to be a light among the nations. But perhaps the most heartbreaking sight was not the destruction itself. It was the people. They had not just grown accustomed to the ruins, they had accepted them as their reality. They had returned from exile, but their spirits remained in bondage, weighed down by discouragement, by years of opposition, and by the absence of strong leadership to remind them that they were meant for more. No one had risen to the challenge. No one had dared to believe that things could change, and no one had taken action to restore what had been lost. Jerusalem was not just physically broken, it was spiritually paralyzed. Nehemiah knew that before he could lead the people, he had to fully grasp the extent of the task before him. He could not rely on second-hand reports or vague descriptions. He needed to see the destruction with his own eyes. Yet he also understood that he could not announce his mission prematurely. If word spread too soon, opposition could rise before the work had even begun. And so, under the cover of darkness, when the city was silent and watchful eyes were closed, Nehemiah set out on a secret inspection, accompanied by only a few trusted men, carefully navigating the ruins of what had once been the most sacred city in Israel. The night was cold, and the air was thick with the scent of ashes and dust as he rode through the broken gates. He passed through the valley gate, his eyes scanning the collapsed stones, the remnants of walls that had once stood strong. He continued to the Dragon Spring, where water had once flowed abundantly, now overshadowed by decay. Then he reached the Dung Gate, a place where refuse was discarded, and it seemed as though the entire city had become a reflection of that very gate, neglected, abandoned, and treated as if it no longer held value. By night, I went out through the Valley Gate toward the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Nehemiah 2:13 NIV. But that
Dust is always in the air, and cleaning it, is the worst. So get a Swiffer duster. It captures dust in one swipe without lifting a thing. Trap and lock 3 times more dust. Oh yeah, you'll love Swiffer or your money back.
Have a break. Have a Kit Kat.
When did you last feel free? Feel awe?
Feel alive. Alaska has all the feels, and only Princess brings out the best. Wonder, joy, surprise, and 1,000 more. We explore by land, air, and sea, connecting it all, so you can connect with everything. Princess Cruises, #1 in Alaska.
Hey, I'm not sure if I've the right coverage for my business.
TD Insurance offers flexible coverage options to fit your business needs.
Well, now that my business is grown, it changes things.
Have you thought about it, Dave?
But as he continued, the devastation became so severe that even his horse could go no further. The rubble was piled too high, the destruction too overwhelming. Dismounting, he pressed forward on foot, his breath steady, his mind absorbed every detail, every shattered stone, every burned gate, every sign of neglect told a story of suffering and hopelessness. Yet Nehemiah was not overwhelmed by despair. He did not see the ruins as an end, but as a beginning. These were not remnants of failure, but the foundation upon which God's restoration would be built. After completing his silent inspection, he returned to his quarters deep in thought. He had seen enough. The time for planning had passed. The time for action had come. But the question remained, would the people believe in the vision? Would they be willing to rise from their complacency and take hold of the promise that Jerusalem could be rebuilt? Or would they resist, too afraid to hope for something they had convinced themselves was impossible? The next day, Nehemiah gathered the priests, nobles, officials, and all those who had a stake in Jerusalem's future. He did not begin by condemning them for their inaction, nor did he lecture them on the reasons for their current state. Instead, he spoke with clarity, conviction, and the authority of a man who had been sent not by earthly rulers, but by the hand of God himself. You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. Nehemiah 2:17 NIV. The words hung in the air, and for a moment there was only silence. The people had lived with the ruins for so long that the idea of change seemed almost foreign. But Nehemiah was not merely making a suggestion. He was issuing a call to action. He was speaking not just to their hands, but to their hearts, challenging them to rise above their discouragement and believe that the God who had brought them back to this land had not abandoned them. To assure them that this was not merely his own ambition, Nehemiah revealed how God had already gone before him, how he had moved the heart of King Artaxerxes, a foreign ruler, to not only grant permission but to provide resources for the work. This was not just an idea. This was divine intervention unfolding before their very eyes. This was proof that the God who had led their ancestors out of Egypt, who had sustained them in the wilderness, and who had brought them back from exile, was still with them. And at that moment something shifted. Where there had been hesitation, there was now resolve. Where there had been resignation, there was now faith. The people who had once seen only rubble and ruin now saw the possibility of restoration. They looked upon the broken stones not as reminders of their past failures, but as the building blocks of a new future. And in unison, they answered Nehemiah's call with words that would mark the turning point in Jerusalem's story. Let us start rebuilding. Nehemiah 2:18 NIV. With that declaration, everything changed. The city that had lain in ruins for decades now had a people ready to rise, a leader ready to guide them, and a God whose hand had been evident from the very beginning. The work was about to begin, and for the first time in a long time, hope was alive in Jerusalem once more. But Nehemiah knew that this was only the beginning, for as soon as hope begins to take root, opposition is never far behind. Beyond the broken walls, enemies were already stirring, watching, and plotting. They had no intention of letting Jerusalem rise again, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that the work was crushed before it could truly begin. Would the people stand firm, Or would fear take hold once again? Would they press forward despite the challenges, or would they retreat into the shadows of doubt and intimidation? The walls had yet to be built, but the battle for Jerusalem had already begun. No great work for God goes unchallenged. The moment a people rise to restore what has been broken, opposition follows swiftly, not just from external enemies, but from the forces of fear, doubt, and discouragement that have kept them in ruins for so long. For years, Jerusalem had been nothing more than a shell of its former self, a city whose glory had long faded, its walls lying in disgrace, and its people struggling to hold on to the remnants of their identity. The surrounding nations had grown comfortable with this reality, for a weak Jerusalem meant no threat to their own influence, no resurgence of a once powerful people under the banner of Yahweh. But now, with the first sounds of stone meeting stone and hands lifting bricks in determined unity, the enemies of Israel took notice, and they were not pleased. From the moment the rebuilding began, opposition arose in the form of two men who had long benefited from Jerusalem's vulnerability: Sanballat, the Horonite, and Tobiah, the Ammonite. These were not merely bystanders. They were men of influence, regional governors with political power who saw the restoration of Jerusalem not only as a threat to their control, but as an insult to their authority. Their initial response was one of mockery, a tactic meant to undermine confidence before the work had even gained momentum. With scornful voices, they ridiculed the labor of the builders, questioning the very feasibility of their efforts. What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are? Nehemiah 4:2 NIV. It was a calculated attack designed not to physically stop the work, but to shake the resolve of the workers, to plant seeds of doubt in their minds. After all, the people of Jerusalem had lived in ruin for decades. What made them think they could change their circumstances now? Tobiah, in his arrogance, added insult to injury, sneering, "What they are building, even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones." Nehemiah 4:3 NIV. The intent was clear: to make the builders feel foolish, to make them question whether their efforts were even worth it. And for a moment, as their words echoed through the broken city, the weight of discouragement pressed against the hearts of the people. But
Canada has been built by the strength of its people. From our mines to our ports, from our logging roads to our city streets, we're strongest when we are united. When we can cheer for different teams and still be on one team, when it counts.
When we come together, we build things that last because we are Canada strong.
It has to be something the whole family will like.
It has to be different every day.
It has to be made with the best quality ingredients.
And it can't take all day, because I don't have all day.
Of course, it has to be halal.
It has to be Sabia Halal.
This Ramadan, make iftar easier with Sabia Halal.
But Nehemiah, a man who had been strengthened in the presence of God long before he set foot in Jerusalem, was not shaken. He did not engage in debate, nor did he attempt to defend himself or the work. Instead, he turned immediately to the one source of strength that had sustained him from the beginning: prayer. Hear us, our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders. Nehemiah 4:4-5 NIV. His prayer was not one of personal revenge, but of righteous indignation. He understood that this opposition was not merely against him or his people, but against God's purpose, and he entrusted the battle to the Lord. And then, without hesitation, he continued the work. So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart. Nehemiah 4:6 NIV. It was a turning point. Not only were the builders unfazed by the mockery, but they pressed on with greater determination. What their enemies had meant for discouragement had only strengthened their unity. But Sanballat and Tobiah were not finished. Seeing that their insults had failed, they escalated their efforts from mere words to open threats, plotting an attack that would bring the construction to a grinding halt. Along with the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod, they conspired to ambush the workers, to spread chaos and fear before the wall could reach completion. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. Nehemiah 4:8 NIV. The rumors of impending attack spread quickly through the city, and fear began to creep.
England, I've spent thought. Hold on.